There we go. Hi, I'm Pam Fox. Welcome back to my YouTube channel where we're streaming live, going through the book of Genesis. Every now and then I like to just take a moment before I start my videos to remind the viewers that this is just a Bible study. I am just a person. I'm not a biblically scholarly, I'm not a person who has studied the Bible my whole life and just knows what I'm talking about. I'm just doing a Bible study. I've been going through the book of Genesis. Last year we went through the book of Revelation, and which was all new to me at the time. And I would say that I would just ask for your grace. There probably are times that I say things that you might consider completely wrong when I'm kind of interpreting what I'm reading. Maybe I am wrong, maybe I'm not wrong. And that's the thing about the Bible is we all study it, and we can be spirit-led and still come to different interpretations as to what it's actually saying. Even Bible scholars will say that they oftentimes get it wrong. Or they change on how they view. Maybe they viewed, had a certain belief about how they interpreted something, and later they come to kind of change their mind. So keep that in mind when you're studying the Bible, that it is a Bible study, and that we go into the Word of God with an expectation that God is there, and that He'll meet us there, and that He has something for each of us. It might be something different for me than it is for you, but He has something in it for each of us when we go into His living Word. The Bible, it's not just about, reading this thing that's going to then guide your life and tell you exactly how to live. Yeah, there's a lot of instruction in there and guidance as far as that goes. But there's so much more to it than that. And so really it's a journey of discovery. It's an adventure. It's a thrill when we study the Word of God. At least that's the way I see it. And we don't always get it right. So I just like to bring that up from time to time. I know during the week when I'm studying, sometimes I'll be, maybe watching a sermon or something like that, and I'll totally disagree with what they're saying. And it's okay. It's okay. So we do get things wrong as human beings. Not that anybody has accused me of getting something wrong. You guys, my viewers, have been nothing but kind to me. And I appreciate that. So anyway, today we're in chapter 39 of Genesis. So let's go ahead and get into it. Last week in chapter 38, it was kind of this detour from the story of Joseph, where we saw an account in the life of Judah, which was one of Joseph's brothers. And it was simply this detour that told us that Judah, what did he do? I've already forgotten. I've already forgotten. Let's go back and look at it really quick. He slept with his daughter-in-law. Well, she tricked him and slept with him. She pretended she was a prostitute, and she got pregnant. And it's really interesting. Sometimes we see these things in the Bible. It's just like, oh, so scandalous. I mean, not sometimes, a lot of the times. And we see it in the bloodline of Christ, right? These are Jesus's relatives. These are his, so Judah is, one of his great grandfathers. And he slept with his daughter-in-law, and she got pregnant, and that was the line of Christ. I mean, if it hadn't been for that was the line that God used, that Jesus was born into when he came and became a man on the earth. So it's really interesting when we study the Bible, we come across some of these things, and it makes us wonder. It's like, okay. But to me, it's just a reminder that these are people. They're people, no different than you and me. They're people, they're humans. They have temptations, they make decisions, sometimes good, sometimes bad. Sometimes there's consequences that are very painful for those decisions. And sometimes God uses what was meant for evil for good, which is what we see here. We'll see that at the very end of the chapter of this book of Genesis, when Joseph, at the end of his life, not at the end of his life, but he says to his brothers, remember, his brothers sold him into slavery. He was just this innocent kid that they hated because their father gave him this coat of many colors. which set him apart and made him more special than the other brothers. They knew that their dad loved him the best. They knew that Joseph's mother Rachel was the one that he loved, the one their father loved. And then he started having these dreams that made it seem like one day he was going to like be a king or something, and they were all going to bow down before him, and they weren't having it. So they sold him into slavery is what they ended up deciding to do. Anyway, God, Joseph, he tells his brothers later, he basically forgives them and says, what you meant for evil, God meant for good, to save many lives, is what Joseph says, to save many lives. And so we're going to see later that God is going to really use Joseph to save. Really, there's going to be a famine in the land, in the known world. So not just there in Egypt, but in all the surrounding land. So it's important to really take a minute and look at a map. Look at your Bible map, like flip to the back or the front of your Bible, or just Google a map of the Mediterranean Sea to today, or a Bible map, and see that the Mediterranean Sea there was the center of the known world. So you had the sea, and just south of that was Africa, right, which is Egypt, which is where we're at right now in the story. So just south of the Mediterranean Sea is Africa, north of it is Europe. Just to the west, you have Spain and Portugal, and to the east, you have the Middle East. And then beyond that, you have Asia, what they called the Orient. And that was the known world. I mean, they didn't know anything about America or Australia or any of these other places at the time. That was the known world. And yeah, and so when you look at Egypt there on a map, you'll see that it was really kind of the hub of the time. It was really kind of Grand Central Station, if you will. And so when Joseph later, he's going to have this dream that there's going to be 7 years of plenty and 7 years followed by 7 years of famine. And so we're going to see it. I know I'm giving a lot of spoilers if you're new, but we're going to see that he's going to be put in charge of all of Egypt, because the Pharaoh believes that he has a way to save all their lives. And he does. God uses him, and he works through Joseph, and he ends up, building all these storehouses, and they save all their grain. For 7 years, they save all their excess. And so then when they enter into that famine, all of the surrounding countries come to Egypt. So it would have been either stay where you are and starve to death and do your best and possibly starve to death, or go to Egypt to get grain and live. That's the account of this story. That's kind of the crux of what happens here. And it's all because of the work that God does through Joseph. So let's go ahead and move on. Today we're in chapter 39. So we had this little detour last week that just reminded us that these are people, and that and even the relatives of Jesus were people, normal, everyday people, sinners. All right, so now we're in chapter 39, and we're going to get back to the life of Joseph. So remember, last we left off, as far as Joseph is concerned, his brothers, they plotted to kill him. And Reuben, the one brother, it says there in the historical account in the scriptures, it was Reuben that saved his life. All the other brothers said, "Yeah, let's kill him. Let's do it. Let's kill him." They were really mad at him, and they hated him. And Reuben was the one that said, "No, let's not kill him." And so instead they threw him in this pit. And then they were like, "Well, what are we going to do?" They left him in this pit for a while, and they saw these Ishmaelites coming, which was their cousins. Remember, Ishmael was their grandfather's brother. So the Ishmaelites were coming, and they were headed to Egypt. So they said, "Well, if we're going to get rid of him, instead of killing him, let's make a little money off of this whole, plan." So they sold him to the Ishmaelites, and off he went to Egypt. All right, so here we are. In the King James, Genesis chapter 39. Here we go. "And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potifar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. Don't you love that word, thither? Okay, so here we have in the first verse of Genesis, basically it's starting right back off, and it's telling us that The Ishmaelites took him to Egypt and they sold him to Potiphar. And it says that Potiphar was an officer of Pharaoh. He was a captain of the guard. So right away, we know that this Potiphar character is a high up, right? He's an officer of Pharaoh, who's the king of all of Egypt, which Egypt would have been considered kind of like America is today. It was kind of like the country. Not that I think we're the country, but you know what I mean? They were like kind of like the leaders in the known world. So Pharaoh was kind of in their day, kind of like the president of the United States is kind of considered in our day. He was the guy. He was kind of the ruler of the known world. And one of his officers, Potiphar, was the one who, think about this, you guys. Anybody could have bought Joseph when he came in onto the slave trading, whatever, and he was put up for sale. All these people would have been there coming in to buy slaves. Potiphar was there that day, and he is the one that bought Joseph. So right away, you kind of see God at work in this. So Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, which means he would have been captain of like the military, kind of think of it that way, captain of the guard. He bought him. And it says in verse 2, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. So we see here that the Lord, it says that Joseph was a prosperous man, and that word prosperous is a very specific word it's synonymous with money. So they're not just talking about, he was a good athlete or anything like that. To be prosperous, there's an idea that everything he did brought more value. It brought more worth. It brought more money. And so, so he was brought in as a slave to Potiphar, but it says he was brought into the house of his master. So you have to understand that as far as slavery goes, it wasn't uncommon for anyone to buy slaves, and you would have slaves that would work in your fields, maybe, as gardeners or as shepherds. You had people that would work in the barns. And then you would have people that actually lived in your household, and those people would be considered members of your household if they lived in your household. And we see here Joseph that he lived in Potiphar's house. And he considered him a prosperous man. And it says why. It says, and the Lord was with him. So you're going to see a lot of examples in here of this. I oftentimes bring up this, that the Old Testament, well, really the whole Bible, is written in this Hebraic style of writing, which is to say that you and I, we're accustomed to more maybe the Greek or the Americanized style of writing, where things are linear and they're chronological. And they're put in that way for you and I to really fully understand what is being said. The Hebraic style of writing, however, you'll see this once it's brought to your attention and you start studying the Bible, are these pieces of the puzzle that are kind of thrown in, and then it's up to you to use your intellect to kind of put it all together and really understand what is being said. And we see a lot of examples of this. And so in today's chapter, you're going to see the phrase, and it came to pass. You'll see that a lot. And it came to pass, which just really means, and then this happened, and then this happened, which is kind of a clue as to the order of how things go. But here, basically, it's saying in verse 2, and the Lord was with Joseph, and he was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. So we know that Joseph is living there as a member of Potiphar's household. We know that Potiphar considers him a prosperous man, which would have been, if you've got a member living in your household and you consider them a prosperous person, you're going to give them more and more responsibility, right? Because they're bringing more value, more worth, more money into your household. So I'm just kind of really setting this up so that you understand what's happening here. And then, of course, and it starts that verse by saying it is, and the Lord was with Joseph. So this is why Joseph was a prosperous man. It doesn't have anything to do with Joseph being smart or entrepreneurial or any of those things. I mean, yeah, he was probably those things, but we need to really understand that God was doing a very specific work through Joseph for a very specific meeting. And of course, you and I, if we've read ahead, we know it's going to be to save many lives. That's the end game. All right, verse 3. And his master saw that the Lord was with him. So Potiphar sees this. He sees that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. So there we see that word prosper again for the second time. really trying to emphasize and let you and I know that everything that Joseph did really kind of turned to gold, right? And people recognize that he was of great value. All right, verse 4. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him. And he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had put into his hand. So when we see this, and Joseph found grace in his sight. So he found grace in the sight of Potiphar. And remember that word grace means unmerited mercy. It means you are given mercy and kindness even though you don't deserve it. And it's not that Joseph didn't deserve, he was an innocent man, right? He didn't deserve to be thrown into a pit and sold into slavery and all this stuff, but he was. But what you have to understand is the relationship between a slave owner and a slave was one that would have meant that the slave owner owns that slave and he can do whatever he wants with that slave. Now, when we come to the Levitical law later, right, that is the Jewish Levitical law, we'll see God telling them when it comes to the relationship with slaves and their master, masters are supposed to treat their slaves with kindness and with fairness and with goodness, and they're supposed to set them free in the 7th year or something like that. But generally speaking, when it came to slavery, the relationship between a master and a slave was that I own you and you do what I say and I can treat you however I want because you belong to me. So this idea of a master showing grace over their slave, it might have been a thing, but it wouldn't have been necessarily a common thing, and it wouldn't have been an expectation of a master to treat the slave with grace. But we see here in the scriptures that Joseph found grace in his sight. So that's telling us something about the relationship between Potiphar and Joseph. Not only did Potiphar want Joseph in his household because everything he did prospered, he showed him grace. So there's really kind of a picture here starting to develop of that relationship. And it says, and he served him. Joseph served Potiphar. So Joseph understood his position. He was his servant. And he understood that Potiphar trusted him, and he understood that his place was to be faithful to Potiphar. When it says that he served him, it means that he understood his place was to be faithful to Potiphar. So Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. So Potiphar placed Joseph as the manager of his household, which would have been a really big deal. And I'm just going to presume that this would have been extremely uncommon to place a slave as manager of your whole household, because it means you're putting them in charge of everything, particularly when you leave. You are in charge. You are the boss. Joseph would have been the boss over all of the family, over all of the other servants, everything that takes place, everything that's done, any questions would have, problems, they would have gone through Joseph. Potiphar trusted Joseph. Okay. He says overseer over his house, and all that he put into his hand. Potiphar gave Joseph everything and trusted him with everything. Verse 5. And it came to pass, and then from the time that he had made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. So this is just telling us basically that as Joseph began to live in Potiphar's house and began to serve Potiphar, that the household flourished. Okay, it says that it came to pass that he made him overseer. Let's see. That the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house. So here we don't have the word prosperous, but we have the word blessed. So God blessed Potiphar's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. So this idea that he's really beginning to flourish, Potiphar's household. Better crops, better livestock, better workers, better, the family is doing better. Everybody is doing better now that Joseph is in charge. So there would have been a certain degree of appreciation. Potiphar would have, really appreciated all that Joseph did. There would have been a certain degree of respect, but technically Joseph still belongs to Potiphar. He's still a slave. He's not a free man. And Joseph understood this, and he considered himself Potiphar's servant, which again meant that he wanted to be faithful to Potiphar. Verse 6, and he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. Now, all this is saying is basically that Potiphar, when it says he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat, is basically Potiphar really he trusted Joseph so much that he had no idea what was going on, except for the food that was put in front of him. I mean, really, that was the extent to really how involved he was in his household. He trusted Joseph with all the ins and outs and doings and beings in his household. The only thing he knew about was the food that was put in front of him, and he was happy with that. So, and he was happy with just how well everything was going within his household. So he had no reason to not fully trust Joseph. And then it goes on to say, and Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. Now, this word goodly is an interesting word. It's a picture of a countenance, which is your face and the expression of your face. And it's a picture of beauty. So really, I think all it's saying here is he's a good looking guy. Joseph was handsome. And it says well favored, which means that when people looked at Joseph, they liked him. They liked the way he looked. They liked who he was. They liked what he did. He was well favored. And that's important as we head into the next verse, because it says, and it came to pass after these things, so then, that his master's wife, that's Potiphar's wife, cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me, lie with me. So we have this setup that Joseph was a goodly or an attractive person. He was well favored. Everything he touches turns to gold. The entire household is prospering because of Joseph. He lives there in the household. I think what this is saying is that Potiphar's wife was attracted to Joseph. She probably had a crush on him. I mean, an ongoing crush on him. He was an amazing person. He was good looking. He was strong. He was smart. Everything he touched turned to gold. And he belonged to Potiphar. By extension, he belonged to Potiphar's wife. So technically speaking, she can still tell him to do whatever she wants, and he has to do it. Okay. So it came to pass, it says that she says, lie with me. Verse 8, but he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hand. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? So he basically rejects her. She says, lie with me. He says no. And he explains why. He says, my master has trusted me with everything, including you. I cannot do this thing against him. And he goes further to say, and I can't sin against God. So first of all, just from a surface point of view, Joseph knew that if he were to have this affair with Potiphar's wife, it could mean death for him. I mean, that would have been the expectation. That would have been, that would have been the expectation. And don't forget that just a few chapters back, Joseph's sister, Dinah, remember she was raped by, what was his name? Shechem or I can't remember, something like that. And his brothers, basically they killed him and everybody else in his clan because she was defiled. He would have understood that to make that choice to obey her and to lie with her, it would have been betraying Potiphar, and it would have been a sin against God. So he tells her that. Verse 10, and it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business. So some more time went by, and then Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men in the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, lie with me. and he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. Okay, so here, Potiphar's wife, she's pretty intent on getting her way. She's already commanded him to sleep with me, and he rejects her and says, no, I can't betray Potiphar, and I can't sin against my God. And then one day when there's no one in the house, so Potiphar is gone, maybe on business, all the members of the household are at work or out or whatever, maybe it's a beautiful day, the house is empty. Joseph comes in and Potiphar's wife is there, and she knows this is another opportunity for her to get what she wants from Joseph. So again, she tells him to lie with me, but this time she grabs him by his garment, which would have been the little robe that they wear, the tunic or whatever. And again, Joseph would have known, like, to fight back against her or even to put his hands on her to try to get out of her grasp would have meant punishment. It could have meant a beating. It could have meant prison. It could have even meant death. If Potiphar says, off with his head, then so be it. That's what it would have been. And nobody would have argued with it because he laid his hands on Potiphar's wife. So instead of fighting back or pulling her away or pushing her away, he wiggles out of his tunic and he runs out of the house. And so she's standing there with his garment in her hand. Verse 13. And it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, so again, we just have some more time that goes by. She's sitting there. She's holding his garment. She's trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do next? I'm sitting here with Joseph's garment. How am I going to explain that? And she comes up with a plan. So she calls to the men of her house and spake unto them, saying, see, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. Did I skip a verse? I don't think so. She says, he came, he raped me, and I cried out. And it came to pass when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. So she calls in all of these, she wants some sympathizers, right? So she calls, oh, help, come quickly. And so some of the people come into the house and she tells this story, this fake story. It's a lie about how she was raped. Now, remember, this is the second time we've seen an account of rape here in the first book of our Bible. The first one was Dinah. And what was Shemek or Shechem or whatever his name was? He never denied what he did. Instead, he said, I love her. Let me marry her. Here, we're going to see Joseph being accused of rape, only he's going to obviously deny that it ever happened, and it didn't happen. So we have two kind of stories of rape, but very different. One where it actually did happen, one where it didn't happen, one where the man was guilty, and another where the man was innocent. It's interesting. And it came to pass, I only bring that up because I know that that's a hot topic today. And it's a hard thing because obviously if a woman gets raped, we want her raper to be caught and to be tried and to be sentenced, right? We want that justice. On the other hand, if she's telling a lie, we don't want all of that to happen to her so-called rapist if he's innocent. So it's a hard topic because oftentimes there's no evidence. It's just his word against her word against his word. And the stories don't match up. And, and what do? You just have to take sides or whatever. Sometimes it's taken to court and it's all brought out. And it's just one of those things where, it's one word against another with no evidence. So I just bring that up because obviously this is a story as old as time. It's been taking place since the book of Genesis. It's still taking place today, unfortunately. So be careful out there, whether you're a man or a woman. Be smart. Not to say that that's going to make you immune to anything bad ever happening to you, but we can try to be smart about these things. So anyway, all that to say, where are we? Verse 15. So she's telling this story. It says, and it came to pass when she heard. So she's telling the story to the people that he raped her, basically. Verse 16. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. So she's holding on to that so-called evidence, his garment. So now she's got all these sympathizers. She's told her story, and now she's waiting for Potiphar to come home. Verse 17. And so he comes home, says, and she spake unto him according to these words, saying, the Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. So that's to when they talk about how he came into me, they're talking about sex. She's basically saying, this Hebrew servant, what you brought into the household. So she's putting all this blame on Potiphar. She's hurt, right? Because she didn't get her way. She wanted to sleep with Joseph. She didn't get her way. She got rejected. Joseph and Potiphar seem to have this bro relationship, so now she's just she's causing all this trouble. So you brought this Hebrew servant. He raped me. He raped me in order to mock me. So she's making all this stuff up. Verse 18, and it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. So she's basically saying, he raped me. I tried to fight him. I screamed, there was nobody here. And then, when I cried out, that's when, he scurried off, and I kept his garment, as evidence. Verse 19, and it came to pass when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, after this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. So Potiphar's mad. He's mad, but remember, he trusts Joseph. And there's not really a whole lot more that it says as far as Potiphar and how he's taking all of this. It doesn't say, Potiphar didn't believe his wife. He sided with Joseph. There's none of that. But we have to remember this relationship that they have, which is a one where he fully trusts Joseph, and also one where Joseph is still his servant, which means if he wants to say off with his head or whatever, he can sentence him. He could do that in a snap of his fingers. So really, Joseph's life is in Potiphar's hands at this point. So it says that his wrath was kindled. So he is mad at the whole situation, but we don't know if he's just, obviously when you first hear something like this, you're going to be mad. That's kind of how humans react. We react emotionally before we kind of get all of the details and the evidence and the different sides of the story. And he hasn't even talked to Joseph yet. He's only talked to Potiphar, his wife. So it says his wrath was kindled, verse 20, and Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. So he does throw him into prison, which to me, I'm going to say that this was an act of mercy, because he could have had him immediately killed and nobody would have questioned it for what his wife was saying that he had done. But instead, he puts him into prison, which tells me that he probably didn't fully believe his wife, and he wanted things to calm down and he wanted himself to calm down, remove Joseph from the equation, figure out what's going on here. Maybe he'll get a chance to talk to Joseph and get his side of the story. But all we know is he put him in prison where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. It says, but the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. So now he's in prison, and God is still with him, and he's still blessing everything that he does. So he's there in the prison, and things start to shape up and look better in the prison because of Joseph's presence and because of God's blessing through Joseph. It says, and the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. So he's basically made kind of like a warden of the prison there. He was put in charge of the prison. And the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. All right, so this was a short chapter. I had a feeling we'd get through that pretty quick. The next chapter, chapter 40, is also very short. So let's just keep going. We'll go ahead and do 2 chapters today. Okay, chapter 40. And it came to pass after these things that the butler of the king of Egypt and his baker had offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was wroth against 2 of his officers, against the chief of butlers and against the chief of the bakers. And he put them in ward in the house of the captain of the guard into the prison, the place where Joseph was bound. And that bound doesn't mean he was like, up against the wall in shackles. I mean, maybe for a period of time he was, but he was bound, meaning he was placed in prison. He was bound in prison. But he was working there as the warden of the prison. He had been given duties and responsibilities and people to oversee there in the prison. So now we have 2 of Pharaoh, remember the king of the whole known world, the king of Egypt, the Pharaoh, 2 of his It says that his butler and his baker offended Pharaoh. It doesn't say what they did, but they offended Pharaoh. Who knows what they did? And he sentences them to prison. So off they go into the same prison where Joseph is living and working. Verse 4, and it says, and the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, which means the captain of the guard, the real warden of the prison there, said, okay, Joseph, you're in charge of these two new inmates. Says, and he served them, and they continued a season in ward. So, which means they were there for a season. Who knows how long, but it was a period of time. It could have been a literal season, could have been, a month, could have been a year. We don't know. It says they continued a season in the ward. And they dreamed a dream, both of them, each man his dream in one night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, which were bound in the prison. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning and looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. Verse 7, and he asked Pharaoh's officers that were with him in the ward of his Lord's house, saying, wherefore look ye so sadly today? And they said unto him, we have dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter of it. And Joseph said unto them, do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me them, I pray you. So Joseph believes that in order to interpret a dream, which apparently, in these Bible days, that was kind of a thing. Like you see it a lot in the Bible where someone will have a dream and then it'll be interpreted as a message from the Lord. And we've already seen that with Joseph. He's had some dreams and he's going to have other dreams later. So, but now this butler and this baker, they had dreams and they're asking, they're sad about it. And Joseph's basically, well, I know how to interpret dreams. So he says, please tell me what you dreamt. Verse 9, and the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, in my dream, behold, a vine was before me. And in the vine were 3 branches, and it was as though it budded, and her blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And the Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup, and I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation of it. So right away, he knows what it means. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head and restore thee unto thy place. And thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand, after the former manner when thou wast his butler. So that's basically his job as the butler, is to put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. He's probably one of those cupbearers, or, like kings used to have people to actually taste their food and drink their wine just in case it was poisoned. That way the other person, if they didn't die, then it was okay for them. I don't know. I think it's kind of silly, but they would have people to do that. And so apparently that was his job. And Joseph interprets the dream and says, you're going to be back doing your old job in 3 days. You're going to be restored to your job. That's what the dream means. Verse 14. But he says, but think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, please, he says, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon. So Joseph, he's bringing this up again, that he was an innocent man sold into slavery. He was a free man living in his country. His brothers sinned against him, sold him into slavery, and now he's in prison, still an innocent man. He did nothing to Potiphar's wife. All he did was say no to her when she, wanted to do something that was wrong with him. He's reminding us that he's an innocent man, but he's in prison. And he's hoping, he says to this guy, I interpreted your dream for you. You're going to be restored. You're going to be back in the king's palace in 3 days. This is what Joseph believes, that this guy's going to be back in the king's palace in 3 days. And he's asking him to show kindness. He's asking him to bring up his name to the Pharaoh, and, let the Pharaoh know, there's this innocent guy in your prison. And he's the one that basically interpreted my dream. And it turned out to be true. So Joseph's asking him for this favor. And he wants to be brought out of this house. So even though he's in prison and the Lord is with him and the Lord is blessing him, I think he wants to go back home. He wants to see his father. He wants to go back to his homeland. He wants to be a free man. So he's reminding us of these things. Verse 15. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews. I already read that. Okay. And here also have I done nothing that they should be put me into the dungeon. Verse 16. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there was all manner of bake meats for Pharaoh. Bake meats, which is food or meat. And the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. And Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. I just think it's so fun. I think Joseph is, sometimes I wonder if he's like, just the way he's described in this story, he almost kind of seems autistic. Like, when he had those dreams about his brothers bowing down before him, he's like, oh, I had this dream. I'm going to tell you about it. Common sense would tell you, just like in the familial setting, you don't say those things to brothers who are already jealous of you and hate you. Maybe you keep that to yourself. And here, he knows the interpretation of the dream is that this man is the king is going to hang him in 3 days. And he's like, yeah, I know the interpretation. Let me tell you. I just think it's funny. So he says, and Joseph answered and said, this is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head from off thee and shall hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee. Ooh. And it came to pass the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants, which means he pulled them both out of the prison and let them free, and they came to the festival, and he lifted up their head there, which would have meant he restored them to their positions. He says, and he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, and he gave the cup unto Pharaoh's hand, just like Joseph said. But he hanged the chief baker. Doesn't say why. Maybe he was still offended for whatever reason, but says, but he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. So remember, Joseph asked him, when you're back into the Pharaoh's good graces and your position has been restored, will you please remember me? I'm an innocent man in prison and I helped you out. Maybe you could help me out. But it says he didn't. It says he forgot about him. He went on about his life and forgot about poor Joseph. So that's it. That's the whole chapter. I told you these were short chapters, but we'll go ahead and finish there. Next week, when we get into chapter 41, we're going to see Joseph interpret Pharaoh's dreams. Pharaoh is going to have a dream. And he has, all of these people that work for him, these sorcerers and all of that. And nobody can interpret his dream. They try and they can't. And then the Pharaoh is going to get word that there's this guy in prison that can interpret dreams. So we'll see how that all pans out. But anyway, so that's it for today. I hope you're all doing well. What is today? Wednesday. So this is a makeup because I had to work on Sunday, so I couldn't do my normal live. I might just start doing these Wednesday. It might be a better day for me. I don't know. So we'll see. You can always watch it on the replay if you don't catch it live. But anyway, I've been really praying for all of you, my viewers this week. Really just asking that God strengthen you and is really preparing you for all that is happening in the world and all that is to come. I'm praying that he's really providing for your needs and keeping you from evil, of course. We as Christians really need to be faithful in these times and remember our God and how good our God is. And remember that all he asks from us is to be faithful. And what that looks like for each of us, obviously, is going to be different. But it's this idea of clinging to God and not giving up on God and trusting that no matter what is happening in the world, that he's in control of everything. And just like in this story of Joseph, when there was 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine, God made a way to really work through Joseph and save many lives. It probably didn't look like that at the time during that 7 years of famine. I'm sure everybody thought, we're probably all going to starve to death. We're probably all goners. So God wants us to remain faithful to him, which is to trust him in all that's happening. And to, I think personally, I talk about this a lot, is to try to be in the Word as much as you can. I don't read my Bible all day, every day. Sometimes I go days without reading my Bible. So I get it. It's a hard thing to be faithful to, I think, for some people more than others, just depending on the person. But I do believe that the Word of God is alive and powerful, and that God will meet you there in the Word of God. And if God really is wanting you to, do something different with your life, or take another path, or say a certain thing, or do a certain thing, he'll meet you there as you meet with him. That's what I call abiding with God. You sit down and you open up your Bible. It's a one-on-one. It's your appointment with God, where the two of you are together communing. You're reading his word, which is really listening to him talk to you, and you can talk to him too. I know a lot of times some of these, harder kind of places in the Bible where you think, God, why didn't you just do this or that or whatever? I mean, I don't know about you, but I do it all the time. And then I have to say, I trust you, Lord. I trust you, Lord. It's kind of like that small child, that you just kind of laugh at when they think they know better than you, you just kind of, yeah, okay, whatever. I think that's how God is kind of with us when we have a difficulty sometimes, the saying, God works in mysterious ways. Sometimes we do encounter different things. Like, why didn't God just turn around the 7 years of famine? Why didn't he just, provide everybody with food? Why did it have to go this way? Why did Joseph have to, endure all these hardships? And again, we can ask those questions, but I think it's really important to then, really come to that conclusion that God knows what he's doing. And that goes for today too, in your life. It's in my life and in everything that's happening in the world. It's really hard when something tragic happens, and tragic things are happening all around the world every day. They really are. I mean, really, we talk about slavery here in Genesis. Maybe not in this country, but in a lot of countries all around the world, slavery very much still exists. And of course, there's human trafficking, which does happen in this country, and just a lot of atrocities that happen to people all around the world, different kinds of people, different ages of people. It's really, when you stop and think about it, it's almost too much to endure when you think about the atrocities and the evil and the wickedness that really is alive and well in this world. And so we're really tempted as believers and as non-believers to say, where is God in all of this? And I think it's really important to go ahead and ask that question, but then remind yourself that I'm going to trust God. I'm going to be faithful to God. I'm going to trust that he will take what was meant for evil and use it for good, for the blessing of a lot of people. Okay. That's the business that God is in. So I'm really praying that God, really strengthen you and help you to remain faithful, and really give you a hunger and a thirst for the Word of God. I know that's personally where my faith grows and where I feel the closest to God and kind of blown away by God when I'm studying the Bible. So I pray that for you as well. And until we meet again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. God bless you.